The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are in this world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, your moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. Before we get started with today's webinar, we do have a few housekeeping items I need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you'll be receiving a link after the event that will take you to the webinar on demand. And also, we are taking questions from the audience today. So if you have a question for either one of our panelists at any time during the event, just go use your control panel, submit your questions. It will take probably around 10 or 15 minutes near the end of the event and go through those questions. Okay, with that, I'd like to get started with today's webinar, which is Mind the Gap, Bridging the Divide Between Business and Agile/DevOps Teams with Value Stream Management. Our speakers today, we've got a great lineup. First of all is Christopher Condo, who's Senior Analyst at Forrester and no stranger to the DevOps.com webinar. And we also have Nicole Bryan, who's Vice President of Product at TaskTop. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Charlene.
Well, I know, Chris, you're going to take the reins here, so I'm going to turn it over to you and let you do your thing.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you, Nicole, for inviting me here today. My name is Chris Condo. I am with Forrester, where we challenge thinking and lead change. We do research and analysis on companies in the software development space, and I specifically cover the application development and delivery space, which is all about what developers are doing, how they're working with their teams, their CIO, CTO, and how they're sort of trying to help work in a cross-collaborative way with their neighbors in portfolio management or business or in operations or security or QA. So we kind of cover that whole gambit that's commonly referred to as DevOps. So at Forrester, we work with businesses and technology leaders to develop customer-obsessed strategies that drive growth. That piece about customer-obsessed is really critical to our perspective on how we deal with software development and the way that organizations that do software development should think about their customers. They should really be customer-led. They should drive their improvements with customers first and foremost in their minds, and everything that they do should be all about delivering value to those customers. So let's get into it. Some of the questions that I'm hoping to answer today, first of all, is Agile plus DevOps enough to have a successful digital transformation? We hear about digital transformation all the time. Maybe people are sick of hearing that term, but we're going to talk a little bit about it and maybe put some parameters around it and let you understand what's going on in this particular situation and how people are dealing with it. Another question is, what is value stream management and how could it help a large organization? So this is one of the things that we're going to address. We're going to talk about how this new, this relatively well-known practice is being brought into the tool space. And then thirdly, how does value stream management bridge the gap between the business and your Agile and DevOps teams? So this is the key. So this is going to be sort of like the nice cherry on top of the ice cream sundae. So first of all, let's talk about digital transformation. This is my little spin on digital transformation because I think about it from a software development and product development perspective. Transforming the business to be customer focused and deliver value directly to the customer via digital capabilities, right? There's lots of ways to deliver value to a customer. It could be customer service, it could be a nice, concierge at a hotel, but we're talking about software today. We're talking about software development and how you deliver software developed products to the customer. So it's all about digital capabilities and getting them to your customer and delivering value to them. So at Forrester, we've kind of talked about this a lot. Several of you probably, or many of you maybe have sat through some of these webinars where we say, hey, Agile plus DevOps underpins a MAD organization. And by MAD, we mean a modern application delivery organization. And we often use this kind of an analogy where Agile is this kind of cool, sleek sports car that can kind of take you anywhere you want. And DevOps is this really cool highway that when you pave the road, Agile can go very quickly. And if you don't use DevOps, you kind of have this windy road through all different kinds of nooks and crannies. And if you don't use Agile, you're kind of in this old beat up jalopy, just trying to like traverse your way through life, hoping that you actually get there, and you're not actually sure. So we talk about these analogies about, modern and sleek and paving the way versus just, a lot of nooks and crannies you have to kind of crawl through. And so it all seems, like, a nice recipe for success, right? So transforming application delivery means changing people, process, and technology. These are very important things to keep track of, right? When you're talking about a digital transformation from a software development organization point of view, if you're not taking these three components together and thinking about them as one, then you're going to miss the boat. Maybe you're going to reorganize your team and not realize that technology and process are part of that effort. Maybe you're just going to adopt Agile and leave your people where they are in siloed organizations. That's not going to work either. And if you don't think about the technology, the architecture of your applications and whatnot, you're not going to get the job done. And so when you think about that, what we're really talking about, going back to that customer-obsessed strategy, right? The idea of being customer-led, insights-driven, being fast, not perfect, being connected. You take those four kind of main components of the customer-obsessed principles and you tie them together in this cool little knot for modern application delivery, where you have technology, structure, culture, talent, metrics, and processes. These things tie together, and but keeping them together isn't always easy. But tying them together is the main gist of this idea of keeping these things together, tying together all those three components of people, process, and technology, so that you can actually deliver products to your customers that they actually want, that are meaningful, that are sustainable, and that actually produce excellent results. So how do you do that? I mean, first of all, let's think about these teams, these product-oriented teams we keep hearing about. What does that product-oriented team look like? Well, you take these siloed teams and you put them into, and you break them apart, and you think about what kind of skill set do I need as my core component team, and what skills do I need as the supporting sort of infrastructure around them. So the product team, in my opinion, should be, in a software delivery organization, a developer, a QA person, and a product manager, someone who understands and can translate these business goals into what the product needs to do. And then around them, in this sort of framework, we have the chief product manager, we have a security officer, we have maybe an architectural expert, we have shared services for DevOps, we have shared services from an operational perspective. We have all types of different people that don't necessarily need to be full-time on these product-oriented teams, but they need to be on sort of like their butt needs to be on the line as far as delivering good products that meet the customer requirements, but also meet the security needs, also meet the architectural needs, also meet the operational aspects and scalability needs. So those teams are sort of referenced by the product team. They are leveraged by the product team so that the product team can stay intact, can deliver their product, can continue to maintain it and balance, live customer issues with incoming business objectives, so that they can understand those issues and take care of that product with the knowledge that they know from having built that product from the inside out. So the next piece we want to talk about is the fact that, we're talking about agile processes. Implement, learn, and evolve, right? This is the whole idea of an agile process, where you break things down into small components. You maybe have 2-week sprints, maybe a 1-week sprint if you really want to, sort of supercharge your team and get things moving in the right direction. You probably don't want to go much longer than this, because then you end up with a lot of waste in the middle, where people find ways to waste time and expend energy without really, getting to the solution of their problem. But the whole idea is, get away from waterfall, do things iteratively, do things where there's, visibility into what's happening. And then from an architectural perspective, you want to go with, if possible, you want to adopt these microservice architectures. And when I mean that, and when I say that, I don't mean blow up your legacy application and create a bunch of microservices. What I mean is carefully understand what the capabilities are of your product. Understand which pieces maybe can stay in the legacy part, because maybe they're not very volatile, they're not going to change a lot, and break away those pieces that are more volatile that you want to change more frequently, or maybe experiment with. Maybe this would be a case where you have a customer engagement piece and you want to actually break that off from your monolith so that that customer engagement piece can go more quickly, or maybe you have a new payment system that you want to take away from that monolith. The whole idea is to, by breaking up these various components into smaller constituent pieces, they are smaller, they are easier to understand and manage, they're easier to test and verify, and they're easier to swap in and out because they're loosely coupled rather than tightly coupled. If you're starting from a greenfield, maybe you don't need to start with a microservice. Maybe you can start with a proof of concept that's a monolith, and then think about how to break that apart afterwards once you understand how it works. So there's a lot of strategies to this, but there's no one size fits all. But the one thing you shouldn't do is just break up your application to a bunch of services, hoping it's going to work without really understanding the underlying patterns, the underlying use cases, and the business objective behind breaking those up to make sure that you're doing it for the right reason. So should be easy peasy, right? Should be a piece of cake. Anybody can follow those 3 steps, right? Go to Agile, go to microservices, make product-oriented teams. So what's the big deal? I mean, what's the problem with that? Everyone should be successful, right? Well, guess what? Ted Shadler just wrote a report. He's an analyst with Forrester. And the Forrester report is called The Sorry State of Digital Transformation. So that title alone should tell you all you need to know. Only 21% of companies believe they have completed their digital transformation. 7% are improving but not transforming. 15% are investigating. 56% currently have a digital transformation underway. And what the biggest takeaway is that many of these firms don't realize that the transformation will be a permanent state of being. That's a really important kind of aspect to this, right? Digital transformation doesn't have like an end. Digital transformation means you are getting in it to win it, and that means constantly transforming, realizing that you're never going to be at a steady state where the product's been released and we're done and we can, wash our hands and move on to the next thing that's going to be done in 2 years. It means being consistently engaged with your customer. It means being consistently engaged with all the aspects of your software delivery process, and it means trying to continuously improve on that process. The problem is that that's not easy to do. And the firms that are trying to undertake these efforts are finding that it's a lot more difficult than they thought, hence this sorry state of digital transformation. We did a recent survey where we compared the results from our survey of DevOps executives, people that are in charge of these things like CIOs, CTOs, how's your DevOps effort going? And we asked the same question to the people that are actually on the floor, the actual PM that's managing the product, the actual developer that's writing the code, the operations people that are actually managing it. And what we found by and large is a giant gap between what is the perceived reality and what is the actual reality of their DevOps transformation. So you take a look at, we automate CI/CD pipeline. 53% of the executives say, yeah, we do that. And 42% say, no, we don't. 42% of the people actually doing it, like, nope. We do that. That means like there's an 11 or 12% gap between doing and not doing. We automate configuration management. 56% of the executives say they do it, but only 45 of the DevOps pros say they do it, which would be like somebody from a DevOps center of excellence or someone who just focuses on that aspect of the software delivery pipeline. And then my team automates releases from to production. 58% of executives assume that was happening, and only 40%, it's actually only happening 40% of the time. So there's this sort of like mismatch between what the executives want, what the business thinks is happening, and what's actually happening. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that these people are pouring a lot of money into these efforts. They probably rightfully assume that those efforts are paying off and being fruitful, but they're not in many cases. So maybe there's a way, we can get some help here. Maybe VSM can help. So let's talk about what VSM is, this idea of value stream management, a combination of people, process, and technology that maps, optimizes, visualizes, and governs business value flow, including epic stories and work items through the heterogeneous enterprise software delivery pipeline. Value stream management tools are the technology underpinnings of a VSM practice. So in theory, if you can manage your value stream and you can do these types of things, you might get better visibility in what's going on in your transformation. So let's talk about this for a second. This is the practice of value stream management. Identify, measure, and monitor processes to eliminate waste and to improve outcomes. So the practice of value stream management is you you walk through your entire software development process, all the way from a customer request, or an idea, a brand new idea that comes in from some, business analyst, and you walk through every single stage and you find out how much time was their process time, how much time was their wait time, and what is the total, delta between those two. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to find that it's like 60% of the time that your idea spends in this cycle is just spent waiting for approval, waiting for somebody to look at it, waiting for some manual step to occur. It's just a big complete waste. And what ends up happening is that delay sort of like ends up having multiple impacts on your business. It not only delays the release of, say, a new feature, it delays getting it in front of your customer so you don't get the rapid feedback that you might want. It might actually miss the mark as far as market opportunity goes, because maybe that idea was great and the anticipation was it would be out in a week, and instead it takes 10 months to get out the door. Those kinds of things just sort of like end up mismatching between your business objectives and the actual capabilities of your software delivery pipeline. So it's important to understand this and do this value stream sort of mapping and then try to manage it. But managing it can be kind of hard because there's a lot of components here. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the fact is that we actually did a report on value stream management tools, and it's been a very exciting journey. These tools are still emerging. So we talked to Paul Ilya, Group Vice President and DevOps Center of Enablement Lead at SunTrust, and this is what he's trying to capture. He says, as we scale our Agile and DevOps journey at enterprise and portfolio levels, we want everybody to visualize the process for delivering products to customers. We want stakeholders to see where their epics are in the life cycle, show progress, show if items are done or not done, all the way from left or concept to the right or cache. I mean, that's really important, right? The idea that everybody can get visibility into this pipeline so that everyone understands what's the holdup, what's going on, what ideas are flowing, which ideas are held up, are we releasing, are we not releasing, how many different things are there that compile in this portfolio to make one giant feature release. Whatever it is, the idea that you want greater visibility is extremely important. And this is one of the reasons why many digital transformations fail, because they don't have the visibility. So issues addressed by value stream management: lack of visibility at the portfolio level, fragmented visibility along the product pipeline, poor management and optimization of development pipelines, weak methodologies to guide continuous improvement methodologies. So if you're not measuring, if you're not constantly keeping your finger on the pulse of what's happening on your software delivery pipeline, it's really hard to improve, right? Anecdotally, you think you might be doing better, but in reality, you might not be. So now there are these VSM tools that are emerging to facilitate the practice of value stream management. This is really exciting because now there's a group of tools that vendors are delivering, and they're all sort of emerging and evolving. They're all kind of coming at it from different angles, but they have these kind of core kind of components to them. They have the idea of integration with other tools. So if you have a DevOps pipeline and you're sort of like, hand stringing it together, some of these VSM tools can do that integration for you. They allow interoperability, so you can actually see an artifact and sort of capture it as it flows through the various tools as a software artifact or as a work item artifact. And this common model kind of helps visualize what's going on and brings commonality to your whole workflow from a visualization point of view. They do mapping where you can actually see visually what's going on in my software delivery pipeline. I can do some analysis perhaps based on that visualization. I can look at the process and the people and see how things are working. I can understand lead time and process time. And from a visualization perspective, you get a better idea of flow and role-based views and metrics and plans. And from governance perspective, somebody can look at, a product manager can finally get a view into what's happening in the software delivery chain to say, hey, wait a minute, that feature that's about to be released, it really shouldn't go out the door until this other feature is ready to go. And then they have the ability to contact that product manager, or they have the ability to contact that release manager and say, let's hold off on that right now. Or even drill into that tool and indicate that maybe that work item should be paused. And so that's really important, that ability for other people to have a view who are stakeholders into the software delivery process and the value chain, have this visibility now that they don't have right now. For many of them, software delivery is just an opaque box. And it ends up being like, sort of a source of contention, right? Like software, the last thing you want to do is when you're a product manager is walk into a Scrum meeting and ask somebody, when's this going to be done? And they say, it's going to be done when it's done. I mean, that's just a miserable response, but that's the reality. Many developers, they aren't really sure, and maybe they shouldn't be. Maybe they should be going through their process in a certain way. But the problem is that when you get that answer all the time, it doesn't really help with visibility. It doesn't really help with confidence. But when you can get an aggregate view and you can capture data and you can track metrics, you can start getting a more comfortable notion of how the speed of the team is going, what's their velocity. And the idea is that VSM tools link each part of the business to the value stream. So along the way, all these blue boxes, and there's probably even a few more of them, they can actually capture, value stream management tools can sort of probe onto the tools all along this sort of continuous delivery pipeline and provide metrics as to what's going on. Which work items are being worked on? How long have they been worked on? Is this team on time or are they behind? How many, what's our, how many bugs are building up in the queue? All those types of things, so that everybody can kind of get an aggregate view and you're not running around trying to get like a status from everybody to find out where are we in the process. And it also provides visibility sort of at a portfolio level, which is something that many, just looking at a DevOps tool chain doesn't always do for you. So this is very exciting. And as I said, it's emerging. These tools don't all do these things. Not all these capabilities exist within every single tool, but they are important because people realize that in order to succeed at digital transformation, they really need to have these types of capabilities. They need more end-to-end visibility. They need to be able to capture metrics like MTTR, mean time to repair, cycle time, backlog rates, escape defect ratios, et cetera. They want to shift to microservices, but that means there's more teams, more metrics to capture. How do you do all that? Things seem to be running amok. Value stream management, these tools are coming, they're evolving to sort of handle that load so people can, and teams can manage that like a portfolio rather than just a bunch of, autonomous teams running amok. And in order to continuously improve, you need to continuously measure. If you don't measure your current state and you don't have anything to compare it to, how do you know you're improving? It's absolutely impossible. So, interesting thing that interesting quote from Carmen Gennardo is, we had visibility of our lead times and waste from code automation to deployment, and are perfecting that, but still felt the need to also have visibility on the left-hand side of the pipeline, PPM and PM, where we were blind on constraints on where flow was going. So, this is that whole thing, right? The whole notion of, product managers getting visibility, portfolio managers getting visibility. And then you could probably carry this quote, although he didn't, all the way to the right side where the operations team can say, now we see what's coming our way. Now we understand what's going, and we can have an open conversation about all these things. And so these kinds of tools kind of like have an analogy of sort of like this air traffic guy. I was talking to Nicole before the webinar, and when we were planning this, and I said, it's kind of funny, on my way to work today, I was listening to the guy in the WBZ copter in Boston, and he's talking about, here's the traffic flow. And I'm like, it's kind of interesting is that these value stream management tools kind of give you this sort of high level view of the traffic flow. This highway's backed up, this tool line's backed up because maybe there's too much technical debt, but this other one's flowing pretty freely. Maybe we should shift our focus to, this backlog. Maybe more resources need to be applied. In an ideal world, the traffic controller could actually manipulate some of these things and maybe magically, add extra exits or, widen a highway or something like that. But that's the whole idea behind value stream management. Is there a way to actually affect change to the pipeline to actually improve the flow of software delivery and actually gauge that with the customer? And so, with that, I guess I'll hand off to Nicole, and we had this conversation, and I think it was a great analogy. The whole idea of the air traffic controller kind of not only being able to report on the traffic, but also even help make the traffic flow go better. So I just love that analogy.
Yeah, we did have, maybe we had too much fun. We kind of went crazy with the analogy because you can, I don't know, at one point we went into subways and all kinds of traffic analogies around how there's a lot of similarities between the goal of managing traffic and how you deliver software. So thanks, Chris, for kind of helping us see what is value stream management and why it's evolving. And so, you know, as Chris said, you know, back in the day, you had, you know, a helicopter. I think are there still helicopters that travel over nowadays? Maybe. I guess so.
We have one in Boston.
Okay, all right. So what's interesting is that, you know, now there's also many other ways, many other digital signals that are coming through to help people manage flow in traffic, and things like Waze and all kinds of things like that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about how you can get this really information-rich visualization into your network. So I've attempted to take back control from Chris. Let's see if this is going to work. Okay. So, you know, as Chris laid out, there's no question that the core problem, what you're trying to achieve, is improving your time to value. And I think at the core, and you know, both Chris and myself have been in this industry for a long time, despite Agile and DevOps, which have helped organizations tremendously. There's still more room for improvement, and there's a lot of concern around being disrupted from startups and competitions, both now and in the future. And you really want to try, and have your digital transformation prevent that from happening. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about two aspects of value streams. One is just, how do you think value streams? How do you think in that way? And then the second thing is, how do you connect your value streams? What is value stream thinking? And one thing that is extremely important is that value stream thinking puts the customer in the center from end to end. And the whole goal behind it is, how you ask yourself over and over and over again, how can we provide greater value to our customer while eliminating delays, improving quality, reducing costs? And so if you kind of zoom out of the details and take a macro look at the activities that are happening when you're building software, this can allow you to identify strategic ways to improve. You know, going back to the traffic analogy, if you can have that helicopter view and you're zoomed out, as Chris mentioned, it'd be, you know, incredibly fabulous if you could also magically create a road to have people go around where there's a bottleneck, for example. And so in order to do this, you need to document or map the flow of value, the activities, and get measurements for each stage along the way. I want to talk a little bit more about what a software value stream looks like, because of course value stream management has existed for many years in other industries, but what does it really look like from a software delivery perspective? And one thing, we talk about this a lot at Task Talk, that there's this common problem when you adopt value stream thinking in software, because your immediate kind of go-to position is that it's a linear concept of value delivery. That's, you know, obviously a lot of that comes from the fact that this came from a manufacturing world, but it's really the wrong model for application development and delivery. And that's because you're combining a very creative process and development phase with a very repeatable product release stage, and then going back again to the creative. And you hear different people refer to this as left side, right side, top, bottom, but fundamentally it makes it different than a manufacturing process where you are absolutely trying to repeat the same thing over and over and over again. And so it's just important to have that kind of paradigm shift in the back of your mind, because it's impossible to optimize a process when there's kind of a core misunderstanding of its mechanics. And so that's why we kind of show this picture, because it does look a lot how people think of value streams. But at Task Talk, we actually think of these phases and the activities within them more like a complex interconnected network that's overlapping and iterative, but still with the customer at the center. And also, while this picture sort of implies that there's equal time in each one of these areas, that's absolutely not the case. So let me walk you through a quick example of what what I mean. So if you take a typical organization, and I think in Chris's slide it was business requests. Somehow something kicks off a request happening, and oftentimes you'll have that coming from a customer. You might be using Salesforce to have these requests come in, but your product managers are using perhaps something like Java to manage requirements and epics and features. And so what you need is to create this connected value stream between where the request came and then where you're going to begin doing work on it. Along the same lines, now you've got your product people using Java for requirements and helping shape features. But the actual development work is happening in a tool, for instance, like Atlassian. And so once again, you've got to connect that value stream if you're going to be able to measure what's happening between it. And then, of course, it gets more complicated than that, because oftentimes you've got sophisticated test management tools that you need that feature information to flow to for them to be able to write automated effective tests. And at that point, you're kind of deep in the heart of that creative and release iteration cycle, where you've got change sets coming in and becoming part of your flow. You've got releases and builds, security checks, and there's a word that I can't say that starts with a V because I can't pronounce it, vulns, if you complete it, that you add in that aspect of this complex network. And then, finally, you've managed to release a feature, and yet you start the whole process. Again, perhaps by a trouble ticket being submitted, or perhaps by another request coming in from the outside. And so this is what we really believe is true end-to-end value stream thinking about that all the way through the life cycle. And the question is, where do you place the value stream goalposts? And I definitely don't want to get into a religious war with anyone, but we kind of have this view that at a certain level, Agile has a tendency to focus sort of from backlog to code commit. DevOps has a tendency to focus a little bit from kind of this notion of code commit to production. Again, left and right side sometimes. And what you really want is the goalpost set customer to customer, broader than either of those, starting with the customer, ending with the customer, and truly everything in between. And so that's really what we, and it's interesting because it's really a mind shift to really begin to think value stream from end to end. I know that in the last couple of years, as TaskTop has been embarking on this more, you think you know how to build software, and it's certainly changed my mindset quite a bit in terms of how we really should be delivering our products, thinking end-to-end value stream. So how do you do it? How do you do this? And and Chris showed a diagram indicating kind of these three pillars: visualization, governance, and then the kind of supporting and core technologies. And one of the most important aspects of being able to do value stream management is to connect your value stream. So let's go back to our traffic analogy. Essentially, what we're talking about is that what you need to do is create your map starting with the activities, right? And so there's obviously, especially in large organizations, there's all kinds of different activities that need to happen in order to deliver a feature. And so you do that, but essentially, if you only think about the activities, it's sort of like a map with no roads. So you've got all these activities, but you have no connectivity between them. And remember, that's because your software delivery value stream does not look like this. It looks like this, a complex, interconnected network. And so hopefully you're not too overwhelmed, but oftentimes when I look at that picture, I get myself overwhelmed. It's like, what do you do? Well, what you need to do is you need to connect your value stream, because at the end of the day, activities don't just happen on their own. It's a key piece to this puzzle. Activities don't happen on their own. They are performed via artifacts, and those artifacts live in tools. And when you take a step back and realize that, you begin to see that you've got actually this incredibly rich digital footprint of all these artifacts that are the manifestation of the work that is happening in your tools. And this digital footprint really can turn your roadless map into a real-time, information-rich, ways-worthy map, which is not easy to say in one sentence. And so hopefully I've convinced you that this digital footprint represents a connected value stream, and that's of the utmost importance to realize that you need to have to do value stream management. But there's one more piece to the puzzle. There's one more secret that is really important in order to have this connected value stream, and that is what we call model-based integration. And so effectively, you won't really be able to have a connected value stream that represents your digital footprint that enables you to have effective value stream management without pursuing model-based integration. And so what you really need is kind of this kind of normalization layer of the digital footprint that exists, because in any large organization, you have many different tools housing the different artifacts, and you need to actually flow that information between multiple tools to complete your network. The other thing that is, even though it's only one word on this slide, which is really somewhat inappropriate, because the scalability aspect of what you need to be able to flow in order to connect your entire end-to-end value stream network is scalability. And organizations don't have 2 projects or 4 projects, they have hundreds and many products. And so you need to have this model-based integration layer in order to be able to scale and easily have information flowing between all of the different projects and all of the different tools. So this is just a picture showing model-based integration in TaskTop Integration Hub, where you can see information flowing from Salesforce to Jama, Micro Focus, ServiceNow, and you're able to understand what is flowing, and that is the first step, of course, to then be able to begin to measure what is flowing within that complex network. So to summarize, we think it's extremely important for organizations to think true end-to-end value stream. And in order to do that, you need to connect your value stream, creating the information-rich digital footprint. And you do that by using model-based integration. And that, to bring it full circle back to our fun traffic analogy, will allow you to achieve true visibility, real-time insights, and improve your time to value. So I just want to end by mentioning the report that Chris had mentioned as well, that is a really interesting read and helps really set the stage for what value stream management is, and the different capabilities around value stream management. It's a really good read. I think, Chris, as you mentioned earlier, it's at the very beginning stages, and I think we want to foster a lot of collaboration and communication and just talking about this, because I think there's many great things that have happened already around value stream management, but I think it's at the very beginning stages of innovation. Yes. And how it can help people with their digital transformations.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, Nicole. That was great. So, like the backstory to this is that I come from a software development, background, and when I started at Forrester about a year or so ago, somebody asked me, they said, the preceding analyst that sat in your spot talked a lot about value stream management, and I said, I'm a developer. I've never heard that word in my life. I think that's just a system for business people to bean count their way and control developers' lives. I don't think I like that. And so then I started, listening more about it and try to, be open-minded about it. And sometime about, Q4 last year, we started hearing from more and more vendors, yourselves and other vendors in this space actually come from different aspects of the software delivery pipeline. Some come from requirements, some come from release automation. And they all started talking about the fact that people finally understand that in order to manage all the various different pipelines of workflow that are going on, they really need to think back to that whole lean software development principles that have been written about, years ago, and how would they put that together into a sort of, how do they codify that into an application to actually give people the visibility they need? So everyone talks about value stream mapping, everyone talks about managing the value stream, but there didn't seem to be any tools to actually tie it all together. So last quarter, Q4, we started seeing all this, and we decided, myself and the co-author, Diego Gudici, decided, let's write about it. Let's investigate this and talk to customers that are using these tools. And, by and large, it's true. These tools are evolving, they're emerging, but they're exciting because they're trying to capture all those metrics. Like when you read the State of DevOps report from Puppet Labs, they've got all these really cool metrics. And you're like, well, how do I get that information? How do I capture that? Well, a lot of those companies are doing it, with homegrown tools, and that's hard to do. And so these tools promise to give sort of like a baseline set of capabilities to provide that. And like I said, they're emerging, they're new, each vendor comes with a different perspective, and that's bringing a lot of energy and a lot of very interesting point of view and focus on this product. And the report itself is generating a lot of interest. So it's all been great. And
Chris, I know we've chatted about this a little bit before, but because I was like, what do you mean value streams? I've never heard of that. And then the next thing is everybody, it's not a phrase that rolls off the tongue all that easily. There's a lot of opinions on what to name it. I encourage people to worry less about the name and more about the concepts and how you would achieve this, because I think that's what's the real key thing that will benefit organizations.
Right. And the other key takeaway is that when you're developing software, engineers, if you look at some of the best kind of situations for a software engineer to be in, it's almost always in a startup, right? Everyone wants to be in a startup. And why is that? Usually in a startup, you're extremely focused, you understand exactly who your customer is, and you're working very hard to deliver value directly to them. And when I was just before Microsoft, acquired our company, we were just so completely focused on delivering, software services to small businesses, and the developers would release code, we get instant feedback from our users, and we were kind of completely in tune with them. And then once you break that out into a large enterprise, once you get really big and distributed teams, it's really hard to keep that focus. It's really hard to maintain that. And something that you knew in your gut, or knew from, just from a seat of the pants, because you had maybe a 3-step process to develop and deliver software. Now it's a 20-step process with governance, compliance, and now there's GDPR and all these other things. It became impossible to determine, am I really delivering value to the customer? And product managers be like, all right, well, why is this taking so long? These tools try to give you that kind of visibility and try to maybe get you back into a space where you can think about, how am I delivering value to the customer? And that's how I kind of looked at it. It's like, this is a tool that can enable you to kind of get back in touch with your customer, because you're monitoring, you have a good idea what's going on, and you can actually measure the outcome, because part of value stream management is actually measuring, is the customer satisfied with the product? And so it's just a great way to tie it all back together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with that, we will open it up if anyone has any questions. Chris or I are more than happy to attempt to answer them.
Yeah, so we've gotten some great questions in so far, but I do want to let the audience know there's plenty of time. If you have questions for either Chris or Nicole, please just use your control panel, submit your questions. We'll get to as many as we can, and then I'm sure that Chris and Nicole will be more than happy to address questions offline following the event if necessary, either they or somebody from their team. But let's go ahead and dive right in. The first question is from Michael, who asks, do VSM tools allow you to track work from customer request or complaint to customer feedback? Is that the goal?
That is absolutely the goal, no question about it. And that's why it's important, when Chris was talking about, and we talk about it a lot too, all the way left side to all the way right side, because that customer request often originates once something is actually out operating, and often is in a different kind of tool. And that's the initiating event that essentially kicks off your value stream. And if you're not able to track it all the way from that moment in time until the moment in time where they're able to give you feedback, you've kind of, you've lost that sense of customer. And as Chris was saying, value stream management, you're trying to get closer, you're trying to get it, closer back to the customer.
Okay, great. Chris, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, this basically just plays to the last comment I made about trying to stay close to the customer, right? This also plays to the part about, like, hand in hand with all these things to really make digital transformation work are this notion of what I would call like a durable or persistent product team that owns a feature not only from like the idea to release, but release to management, to maintenance, to monitoring, and understanding all these things. I was just talking to someone the other day about, they were talking about, how do I measure, my app modernization effort? Is it the number of new services I bring on? Is it the number of new, applications that we retire? I'm like, how about measuring it by whether or not your customers are happy or not? Because it ain't worth modernizing. It ain't worth going through all this effort if you're not going to actually have, customers that are delighted. And one of the things that, like I said, back to my startup roots, is the best part about being in the startup is that you know exactly how the customer feels about your product and you know what to do to fix it. And value stream management, although it doesn't put you back in that mindset, the idea is to try to help these product-oriented teams manage their workflow and balance, what's going on the live site, what's going on in the live release product versus what's coming in from business. And so they can make a measured approach to managing and moving these products forward, retiring debt and moving innovation in a sustainable way, rather than just like, well, let's let a whole bunch of bugs pile up and hope that the customers aren't going to leave us. That's just the old way of doing things. You can't do that anymore.
Okay, great. Well, Michael has a follow-up question to his first question, which is also, it seems like this is focused for the business owner or project manager? Question mark?
Yeah, I disagree with that. This is focused on everybody along the whole entire delivery chain. This comes from the business analyst, the product owner, the development manager, who's now going to be able to see how are all his teams performing, the developer, who can take a look at it and say, geez, this is taking longer than I thought. The last couple of, work items I've had, I've actually underestimated or overestimated, and, help that person fine tune. The QA person can see what's coming. They can understand whether or not they're actually effectively testing a product because maybe defect ratio is going up or down. The operations person, who can understand, these are all the things that are coming. Hey, guess what? We're going to have to think about expanding our AWS account, or we're going to have to think about adding more capability, or we're going to have to think about, a different kind of infrastructure because latency seems to be going up, or some kind of measurement of customer satisfaction. And so these tools are supposed to tie everybody together to understand how the whole product works.
Yeah, and I very much agree with Chris that it is applicable and necessary for every single person that exists in the value stream, of which in a large scale organization, that's upwards of 7, 8, 9, 10 different roles.
Okay, great. Our next question is from Satish, who asks, maturity of a client organization is a key in the success of any agile journey. How can VSM help in this area?
So I would love to talk about that one, because a lot of people get scared off and think, okay, I gotta have everything, sorted out. I gotta be super mature. I have to have thought through everything, from here to 5 years out. And actually, what value stream management allows you to do is actually just see what's there, understand what's actually happening in your organization, and that can then be the catalyst to help you mature. But it's not something that you have to, that you have to kind of, boil the ocean and have everything all the way kind of ready to go, and then you flip a light switch on and there you go, you have value stream management. Instead, what you want is to allow value stream management to expose, dare I say it, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's actually happening. And that can help you then identify where are the most prominent bottlenecks, where are the most difficult areas, and focus on that. And that then in turn obviously helps you to mature.
Absolutely agree with that. The whole idea, every time I talk about application modernization, it starts off with like, get your current state, go through a value stream mapping exercise to understand that state. If all you have is a bunch of, siloed tools right now, just start capturing metrics and writing them in a spreadsheet if that's all you got. But if you can go to one of these tools that can maybe join them together and integrate them, it's possible that maybe you have a bunch of legacy tools that aren't API enabled. There are other ways to get information out of them. But the idea, as Nicole said, is what is your current state? If you don't know what your current state is, you don't know whether or not you've made any progress or not. And so the most important thing is to be able to measure and actually gauge your improvement. And that's what these tools are trying to do, is just sort of give you quantitative information rather than qualitative information, because qualitative is great. It's great to have a hunch. It's great to have ideas. But if you can't back it up by data, a lot of times things kind of go askew when you don't realize they are.
All right, great. Want to remind the audience there's still time. If you have a question for Chris or Nicole, just go ahead and use that control panel, get your questions in. Our next question is from, I believe it's Osiris. Where does a framework like the Scaled Agile framework come into play with a VSM tool? Are VSM tools layering in frameworks such as SAFe, the Scaled Agile framework, or are we discussing something different?
That's a fabulous question. So the thing about value stream management is it is agnostic to any methodology or any software development process that you're using. All you're trying to do is expose the activities, regardless of what they are, and provide measurement so that you can see where you're doing well and where you're not doing well. So you can be using SAFe, and you're using SAFe, but you're not doing it very well. So value stream management kind of sits above that and provides that visibility into all of the pieces, which is, again, why I talk a lot about the connectedness, because if you're doing SAFe, you by definition have a lot of different tools and a lot of different artifact types flowing between those tools, and you need to have the kind of flyover traffic analogy perspective. And no different, I mean, I know probably everyone will have a heart attack when I say this, but value stream management applies to waterfall too. You can map out your activities and understand what's happening in your waterfall process. So it's agnostic to any particular software development methodology, and in fact can enhance and improve any methodology. Chris, I bet you have thoughts around that as well.
I absolutely agree. As a matter of fact, a lot of when I was just talking about app modernization, a lot of them, say, oh, we're going to move to Agile, and it's like, well, do you even know if it's going to improve your process or not? Go through this value stream mapping exercise, start using value stream management to try to capture this. I don't care how you do it, just start doing it, so that you can actually measure the way forward. Like if you don't do this exercise, if you don't actually do sort of this value stream sort of mapping exercise first, you might reorganize your team in a way that's less efficient than it was before. You might use Agile or other techniques in a way that were less efficient than before. And so it's really important just to have these kind of practices and allow them to sort of augment what you're already doing. On a Scaled Agile framework kind of situation, I mean, one of the things that I feel like these tools can help avoid is those extremely annoying Scrum of Scrum meetings. And as a matter of fact, the more meetings you can get rid of, the better. And I have high hope, although I don't have any evidence of it right now, that a tool like this will prevent, a product manager saying, hey, I need to know what's going on. Let's have a meeting tomorrow for an hour. Everybody can give me a status of where we are and what's going on. If we have this kind of a tool that can give that kind of visibility, maybe we can get a few hours back every week to the developers, or maybe a few days. In the case of many of the developers that we interview, they're in meetings all the time, trying to figure out what's going on, who's working on what, how do we collaborate, how do we coordinate. The more visibility and the more transparency you have, the more that people just know intrinsically what's going on, and the better it is to make the whole flow of information work better. So then some product manager can say, I only need to meet with these people because this seems to be the critical path. Everybody else can just continue working. So in a Scaled Agile framework situation where there are these sort of apparatuses in place to kind of link everything together, it might make it even easier to execute on one of those kinds of methodologies.
Okay, great. Let's see, our next question. You talk a lot about connecting tools. Is that all you need to do to have a value stream?
No.
Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Short answer, no, sorry.
No, the short answer is no.
The idea behind the idea of calling, a connected set of tools is, kind of referred to as a software delivery tool chain or a DevOps pipeline, whatever you want to call it. But just having a series of connected tools is helpful if all those tools sort of like, the outcome of one feeds into the next tool and so forth. And maybe you have a continuous delivery sort of setup going. That's great. But do you know if that is actually delivering value to your customer? Do you have ways of measuring the outcome? Do you have the visibility into that tool? Does everybody on that team that we talked about, from the business person to the operations guy and everybody in between, do they have visibility, like kind of like their own sort of like point of view on what's going on? If your tool chain provides that, then you kind of have a value stream. If you have a tool chain that you check in code and a bunch of things magically happen and everyone looks for the log files to see what's happening and the only person that can read it is a DevOps expert, then you don't really have value stream management. You have a connected tool chain, which is nice, but these tools kind of give that visibility, transparency, and they're also capturing metrics in such a way that they can be analyzed and improved upon. I'll let Nicole kind of take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I agree with that. That is a very important piece of having value stream, but it's of equal importance that you have that as I was saying earlier, thinking value stream and understanding what the activities are that actually make up your value stream, and spending the time to analyze the visibility into that and figure out what is, investigating where your value stream is working well and where your value stream is not working well. So it's a multifaceted value stream management is a multifaceted set of things you need to do.
All right, great. Quick time check. We're about 3.5 minutes to the top of the hour. I think we have time for one more question with a quick answer or quick-ish answer. Satish is asking, who is the best person to do VSM? Would it be the product owner, the Scrum Master? And there are positives and negatives to both. Scrum Master may not have complete visibility, but the product owner would be external to the Agile development team. So, really, who's going to be that person, the best person to do VSM?
So that is super interesting. I don't know if any of y'all have listened to Mick, our CEO, talk about the importance of that. We think there's actually a new role that is going to emerge, that of value stream architect. And Chris, I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because I think it's not that you have to have a value stream architect, but it is sort of a role that we think would benefit organizations that is not kind of tied to any one piece of the value stream, but rather is taking a holistic view across the entire value stream. Chris, quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I haven't thought about that specific kind of role. That's a very intriguing idea. And I wonder how that crosses over or overlaps with the portfolio manager who's trying to understand all the similar types of value related and financial related impact of whatever you're doing. But what the research right now is still new from my perspective. I'm still coming at it sort of from a developer, but I could see like I said at the beginning, there are people who are on the requirements and the business product side are saying we need value stream management because we really want to think about these things in a sort of a coordinated way across all our different product lines. And then we see it also from the release manager saying, I need value stream management because I'm orchestrating continuous delivery. And so each of them are saying they need this capability, but they each need it for different reasons. And so I guess I'm waiting to see how this all works out, but I have a feeling that there are going to be a couple of people who feel that VSM is part of it, a part of their sort of life, and maybe there is sort of this, architect or, kind of like, sort of high-level team that just sort of like is kind of looking at this from a high-level macro view because now they have visibility into what's going on. I kind of think about it as like, those old World War II movies where all these generals are standing around looking at all these little figures on a map of Europe and trying to figure out where they're going to move their different soldiers and stuff. And I'm like, well, there's a whole bunch of people around that table that they're all kind of part of it. And so I kind of see that VSM is sort of still more of a group activity, but maybe there is a central person who kind of takes the charge in that. That's a very intriguing concept. I'll be keeping an eye on whether or not that's something that we find out in our research as well. But thank you for bringing that up, Nicole. That's very intriguing.
All right, great. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for the questions. I would like to thank everybody who did submit a question, and I also would like to thank Christopher and Nicole for giving such a great presentation today. I know the audience got a lot out of it, as did I. It was really, really fascinating. Just a quick note to the audience, if you missed any or all of today's event, you will be receiving an email post-event that includes a hyperlink to the webinar on demand, so you can listen to it at your leisure. And also, the webinar will be posted on devops.com. You can check devops.com also for other webinars that we have on tap, so hopefully there'll be one or two there that pique your interest. I again do want to thank Christopher and Nicole for joining me today. Thanks to you both for joining me, and thank you to the audience for listening. Have a great day, everybody.
Same to you, Charlene. Thank you, Nicole.
Bye.
Bye.